Shabbat Shalom and good morning. So our Torah portion this morning is Ki Teitzei, and I ask that you open up your Chumashim to page 1112 because we will be referencing a great deal that's in today's Torah portion. What's especially interesting about the portion is that it contains 74 commandments, more than any other portion in the Torah. To be sure, this is a very rich parsha. That being said, truth to tell, some of these commandments are problematic for our modern sensibilities, while others carry lessons and practical implications for us today. Relative to the troublesome commandments, there are two things that we need to keep in mind. One, they were very advanced for the time in which they were written. And secondarily, we don't live in accordance with biblical law, rather with rabbinic law. In other words, when the rabbis found a problem, they sought to reinterpret the law to make it livable. Perhaps the best known example was how rabbis reinterpreted the commandment of ayin tachat ayin, an eye for an eye. We know that literally, we don't take it literally. What I'd like to do this morning is to take a look at some of these mitzvot, some of which are admirable, but especially some that are problematic. Now, I know that many who lead these Torah sessions may take one or two aspects of the Torah portion and focus on them. You may know, if you've been to some of the other sessions that I've led, that I prefer to do an overview and hit on several different aspects of a parsha. So the Torah portion begins with the guidelines for a man who has captured a woman during a war and wants to marry her. Now, we're living in the 21st century, and as such, we may think of this practice as an applicable, or worse yet, barbaric. But again, let's consider the times in which these rules were established. I'd like to share with you Rabbi Scheiheld's well-articulated point of view regarding this dilemma. He writes the following, and I call this to your close attention. The key, I think, is to be clear about what biblical law is and what it is not. Not every law in the Torah expresses a moral ideal, a picture of how society ought ideally to function. On the contrary, some biblical laws are attempts to make the best of a very bad situation, to introduce and demand a modicum of humanity into what are objectively ugly and degraded circumstances. As the Talmud puts it, the Torah was not given to ministering angels. It was given rather to flesh and blood human beings with all their capacities for cruelty, callousness, and exploitation of the vulnerable. It would be a grave error to assume that marrying a captive is something the Torah wants soldiers to do. It is rather something it permits them to do because it assumes that, bad as it is a better outcome than soldiers simply raping captive women and then abandoning them. The power of the victorious soldier over the captive woman is hardly eliminated in Deuteronomy, but it is to some degree mitigated. Of course, difficult questions remain. Does the Torah concede too much in this does the Torah concede too much in this instance to the moral status quo? Should it not simply have declared marrying a woman against her will as intolerable in every circumstance? This is an almost impossible predicament for law. Concede too little to human nature and you risk being ignored altogether. Concede too much and you risk acquiescing to or even endorsing barbaric behavior. Let me read that for you one more time. It is, I think, very well put. Again, Rabbi Held writes, concede too little to human nature and you risk being ignored altogether. Concede too much and you risk acquiescing to or even endorsing barbaric behavior. There are no easy answers to these questions, but one thing should be stated unequivocally. We must not assume that what the Torah reluctantly permitted back then, it would also countenance now. The Torah sought to humanize ancient social arrangements, not to sanctify them. The Torah sets a process in motion, one that we are challenged to take up and further. I don't think that could be more beautifully expressed. Because again, as you take a look at this Torah portion, just on the surface, there are a number of problematic issues. And again, we're going to talk about some of the problematic mitzvot and delve into some of the positive ones, which really have, I think, important and relevant implications for us today. So now, by way of that introduction, let's go to page 1012, where we are. And I'd like somebody to read, excuse me 1 second.
Cantor, can you give chapter and verse
Yes.
for those
Yes.
online?
Yes, it is chapter 21, and we're looking at verses 12 to 14. This is pages 1112, 1113. Can we ask somebody to read verses 12 to 14, please? Please, thank you.
You shall bring her into your house, and she shall trim her hair, pare her nails, and discard her captive's garment. She shall spend a month's time in your house, lamenting her father and mother. After that, you may come to her and possess her, and she shall be your wife. Then, should you no longer want her, you may release her outright. You must not sell her for money. Since you had your will of her, you must not enslave her.
Okay, let's focus, if we could, momentarily on verses 12 and 13. Does anything jump out at you? Let me pose the question,
Yeah.
perhaps. Okay, please, go ahead, Sheila.
Does she know what's happening? Does she realize that she's, that, not necessarily with the cutting of the hair, by cutting her hair and her nails, he's practically saying to her, you're my slave. In other words, I can do what I want with you. And my first thing that stood out to me is, does she know that he is allowing her time to mourn? Or that he wants her? I mean.
Yeah, I see that it's an excellent point. I see another point, and that is by making, 1 second, I'm going to call on you, that by making her unattractive, is he still going to be attracted to her? Okay, sorry. Yeah,
Before we get married, he wants to marry her, yes, because she's
Yeah.
attractive. Don't we go to the mikvah and cut our nails and our hair?
interesting.
So it's something to purify you for the wedding.
That's a very interesting observation that I hadn't
But they
considered.
would own about
Right, the
that.
laws of mikvah come much later, but it is an interesting, I mean, my personal observation is that the intent is to make her unattractive to see if he's still attracted to her. But here's what, the other thing that jumped out at me was what is missing here? There's nothing here about conversion.
Right.
Of course, laws of conversion come later, but still, if earlier in the Torah, there are references to the concept of conversion. So it kind of hit me that there's nothing there about
What-
conversion.
As Moses, there's no reference, I think, of the conversion.
Yeah,
Right, that's true.
Married.
But I think that between Moses's marriage and to Zipporah and
And this is
in this
already-
instance, it's that there is reference in the Torah to conversion. All right, let's go on now. I'd like to look at verses. Yeah,
I find this very strange. The guy captures this woman and is sexually attracted to her, to probably a large extent.
right.
And she, quote unquote, it's the right term, defeminizes herself with the cutting the nails.
Right.
Like to cool him off. So
Yeah,
she- So
exactly.
she can mourn for a month.
Or that he changes his mind. He may, it could be that after she cuts her hair and trims her nails, he changes his mind. And maybe that was the point.
If she is doing it, that's interesting. If she is cutting her hair and trimming her nails, is she being told this, or
Yeah,
is
I would
this
assume.
something that's a custom at the time? I mean,
Reading-
why?
the
why is she
implication,
doing it?
I think the implication here is that it's something she's being told to do.
I was seeing it the opposite, that she's making herself more attractive. Because, perhaps the style of the hair, or perhaps being, a captive or whatever, they may have had much longer hair, they may have not been as, to me, it's like she's going to a beauty parlor. She's getting her hair done a little bit nicer, nails trimmed is more attractive,
Possibly.
and so.
And the hair trim is right.
Well, it's possible.
I don't know.
The other thing is,
It's like the opposite.
by cutting the nail, nail can be used as weapons if she hates. the nail,
Interesting.
scratch him and be
That's a-
nasty to him.
That's a very interesting observation. All right, good. Let's go on. There's a lot to cover, and maybe we will in fact go to 10 o'clock. All right, if somebody, will read, let's look now at verses 15, because we only scratched the surface. Okay, let's look, if somebody would read please verses 15 to 18.
Okay.
Same page, 1,113. This is chapter 21, Nelson, verses 15 to 18. Somebody read, please. Okay,
If a man has two wives, one loved and the other unloved, and both the loved and the unloved have borne him son, but the firstborn is the son of the unloved one, when he wills his property to his sons, he may not treat as firstborn the son of the loved one in disregard of the son of the unloved one who is older. Instead, he must accept the firstborn, the son of the unloved one, and allot to him double portion of all he possesses. Since he is the first fruit of his vigor, the birthright is his due.
okay, so look, we know that polygamy has been outlawed for many, many years. But is there anything that you think we could glean from this that would be applicable to today's?
Yeah, Murdoch's lawsuit right now. The kids are fighting and it's a question of which wife.
Yeah, I was thinking something along the same lines. Anybody else? Here's what I was thinking, that the lesson perhaps to be learned here is that a man divorces his first wife, has children with the first wife, then marries another woman, has children with her, that attention should be paid and respect and inheritance, make sure that the children of the first wife are not excluded from the inheritance. Okay, now let's go on.
Were the Jewish laws on things like that more advanced than those of the other people?
I think so. I think that's
We write a lot about it.
right. I think that's, we talked about that a bit earlier, that most of these laws were in fact, well, we think that we can't fathom them today. They were advanced for their time. All right, now I want to take a look at chapter 21, verses 18 to 21. And here we have what is perhaps the most difficult mitzvah to fathom in the entire Torah. Okay, once again, this is chapter 21, verses 18 to 21. And if somebody would read for us, please. This is going to be very familiar to you. Okay.
If a man has a wayward and defiant son, who does not heed his father or mother and does not obey them, even after they discipline him, his father and mother shall take hold of him, bring him out to the elders of his town at the public place of his community. They shall say to the elders of his town, "This son of ours is disloyal and defiant. He does not heed us. He is a glutton and a drunkard." Thereupon the men of his town shall stone him to death. Thus you shall sweep out evil from your midst. All Israel will hear and be afraid.
Okay, so temporarily, I'm going to ordain each of you as rabbis. You're rabbis. Okay, what the heck are we going to do with this? What are we going to do with this?
Ignore it. I think,
It's the Torah. You can't exactly ignore it.
I
Okay.
know in the past when we've discussed this exact,
Yeah,
it's really for a warning. There isn't any real proof that it was carried out.
right.
And so I think it's just a model, I guess.
And that is one interpretation. Sheila?
What we have today, we do have cases like this. Every once in a while, parent turns a kid in. The mother, supposedly the mother of the guy who did the killing in Georgia at
Right.
school, called the school,
Yeah.
warned them. And there are parents who do try to get help, and they're very often ignored. So it's really, if you think about it, it's very relevant. I mean, we wouldn't, I don't think we want to bring it to the attention of the people because they would start stoning the kid. But it's an issue today again. But there are parents who do turn in their kids. They can't deal with them anymore.
Right, right.
Well, this also says
It's not
it should be an
normal. It's
obligation.
happening
Yeah.
nowadays.
It's,
It's happening
Sorry.
in America, but in other places in the world, if a woman, a girl, they stone her. So it's not that it's not happening. It's happening.
We're focusing, it's a good point, but we're focusing on Jewish law.
I think that, I think the rabbis put so many stipulations on exactly what,
Yeah, that's what we're gonna get to.
so many levels that they have to follow.
Right, and that's exactly what happened. And remember what we said earlier, we don't live by Torah law, we live by rabbinic law. So here's what the rabbi said, okay, and here's some of the interpretations. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai said, there never was nor ever will be a stubborn and rebellious son. The law was, in his view, a matter of theory rather than practice. Perhaps the law was meant to be recited to such a child in order to persuade him to mend his ways. Now, let me ask you a question. The Torah says a son. Do you think that they were referring only to sons, or were they using sons as a generic term for children?
Most probably genetic.
Yeah.
Most likely generic for children. Okay. We don't know for sure. We can only speculate on that.
Otherwise, they're implying that women are just not worthy of even being stoned.
No. I hope that's not true. That's, yeah.
If their daughter runs away, which if she runs away, they don't have her. So there's no issue. But I mean, if she marries someone she shouldn't, of course, she won't be there. She will go with the husband. Or no, they actually go with the wife, don't they?
Yeah. Or it could be that the Torah couldn't imagine a girl being rebellious.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe.
Seems to me this underscores and enforces the one of the 10 commandments, honor thy father and mother.
Right, right.
Uh,
And that's probably the reason that the Torah takes such a harsh stand on this. Okay, so here's another interpretation. Another approach the rabbis took was to make the commandments so restrictive as to make it difficult, if not impossible, for such a case to arise. Here were some of the boundaries they set. The child must be within 3 months of attaining maturity. Younger than that, he was still a minor. Older, he was still a child. He must have stolen money from his parents, used it to buy a specific measure of meat and Italian wine, eaten and drunk at the same time, and in a place other than his parents' house. Okay. In short, the rabbis made the conditions so stringent that they could never be met. Rabbi Yehuda said, if his mother is not like his father in voice, appearance, and stature, he does not become a rebellious son. Why? Because the Torah states he will not obey our voice. And since they must be alike in voice, they must also be alike in appearance and stature. Now, this seems to me to be somewhat of a stretch, but it's clear, as you were saying, that the rabbis set up all sorts of parameters to ensure that this was never enacted. And, one other observation is that perhaps a lesson to be learned by setting up these restrictions was that people change over time, okay? A rebellious child can grow up into a responsible adult. Okay, let's move on now to Chet. Yeah, please. Sorry, go ahead.
Sierra, you want to go first?
Yeah, I do. One observation that I have is that it makes it a community problem if there are if there is a poor relation in the family. It's that it's now the community's problem that the family is struggling.
Okay. Okay, Nelson?
It seems to me that this is a counter to the Ten Commandments, honor thy mother and father, because
Right, which
sometimes your parents can drive you. No, not in Errol Elliott says, in a quite different sense. Sometimes your parents can drive you nuts and you want to kill them. And you have to still honor them. But as a parent, you should recognize sometimes your kids can drive you nuts, but you're still supposed to love them.
Well, no, that, remember the Torah, the Torah says, honor, like, it's interesting, it says, honor thy mother and father. It doesn't say you have to love your mother and father.
Right.
So, okay, yeah.
There's
So-
another point about the
Yeah.
mother and father is, you know, you're either a bad child, you're rebellious and you get stoned, or you're a good one and you honor your parents and you get long life.
No, no.
Just the contrast.
Right. Okay, let's go on now to chapter 22. That would be in your Eitz Chaim Chumash 1115. And if somebody would read verses 1 to 4. 22, 1 to 4. Okay.
If you see your fellow's ox or sheep gone astray, do not ignore it. You must take it back to your fellow. If your fellow does not live near you, or you do not know who he is, you shall bring it home, and it shall remain with you until your fellow finds it. Then you shall give it back to him. You shall do the same with his ass. You shall do the same with his garment, and so too you shall do with anything that your fellow loses and you find. You must not remain indifferent.
Okay, so we talked about, at the beginning of my introductory remarks, that we have mitzvot in this portion that are certainly applicable to today, as we have some that we're wrestling with as well. And here, this is important. It teaches, and it's applicable today, about our moral obligations when we come into property that is somebody else's. What are our obligations to try and return them? Again, I think I love to see these things that we can see in the Torah that we say continue to be important for us today. And now let's go on.
I have a problem with it. It says, bring it, if you find something on the road, bring it home. How was the person who lost it know that, it's somebody's home, is gonna go house to house?
Well, I think my understanding is you take it home and then you start to look for the owner. You don't just leave it there. You take it home, but you've got now have the obligation, it's in your possession to find the rightful owner.
Another problem might be that if it's livestock, you have to care for it,
Yeah.
feed it, and
Right.
whatever, and there's expense and effort involved.
Therefore, you want to find the owner quickly.
True. Very, very good point. All right, let's go on now to verses 6 and 7. It's the bottom of the same page. Sorry?
I have a problem with,
Yeah. Sorry?
I have a problem with verse 5, especially nowadays.
Yes, well, there's a reason I skipped that.
I
There are things, I will be frank with you, there are some things that I just did not want to get into. And so, but I will tell you, relative to verse 5, one interpretation that I saw of this was a concern over sexual deviancy, that somebody is tricked.
Oh.
And so that was one interpretation that I saw. But yeah, there's some things we're skipping over that I just didn't want to get into.
Like at Hebrew
Yeah.
Academy.
What?
Like at Hebrew Academy, they would skip over the
Yeah,
story of the,
David and
Dina.
Bathsheba.
right, of course. So, okay, let's take a look at verses now 6 to 7, because I know that it's something that people like a lot to read, but I also want to get into Maimonides' comment on that. Somebody would read verses 6 to 7.
I'll read it.
Sure, please.
If along the road you chance upon a bird's nest, in any tree or on the ground with fledglings or eggs, and the mother sitting over the fledglings or on the eggs, do not take the mother together with her young. Let the mother go and take only the young, in order that you may fare well and have a long life.
This is often the subject of Divrei Torah. People love this verse and it sounds really nice. But now let's take a look at what Maimonides says. If you continue to read, see the comment on verse 7, let the mother go, right under the line.
Let the mother go.
Yeah, please read that.
Maimonides states that the mother is chased away to be spared the painful sight of her offspring being taken away. It is not likely, however, that chasing the mother away would spare her pain, because forcible separation from her young and finding them gone later would also be painful. Nor do the comparable laws concerning cattle prevent pain. The mother animal would not know if her calf or kid was sacrificed on the same day or boiled in her milk. But the Torah finds callous are the acts themselves, quite apart from any effect they may have on the mother.
I think this is a very, very interesting observation, because that's something that also,
That comment, what the Torah finds callous are the acts themselves.
that it's just, the Torah is saying that it's not proper to do, it's not so much the effect on the mother bird, because the mother bird is going to realize sooner or later that the eggs are gone.
Yeah,
The Torah is simply saying this pasnish, it's just
Yeah.
not something that you do. Okay, I know we're trying to cover a lot of material.
but what is it that you're not, excuse me, what is it you're not supposed to do? Not take the young? Or
It says
not take the young, this is where I'm a little confused.
you're not supposed to take the young in the presence, you're not supposed to let the mother see you take. Yeah.
It's in Hebrew school, this is
Yeah,
the
yeah,
project.
right.
But when you read Maimonides' comment, to
He-
me, suddenly it's not clear. Is it just don't take the eggs from the bird altogether?
Well, I think my understanding is you don't take it in the presence of the mother. The Torah is saying it creates pain for the mother. Maimonides is saying the mother's going to realize sooner or later that the eggs are gone anyway, so you're not necessarily sparing the mother.
Same thing today with kidnapping.
We're going to talk about kidnapping. That's also good. Yeah.
On October 7th, where they took the kid
Right.
right in front of the parents, or the parents in front of the kids. Either way, it was traumatic.
Absolutely. Okay, let's go on now, go with me. Okay, give me 1 second. Okay, let's look at verse 8, if we could. And this is chapter 22, verse 8. Anybody? Okay.
When you build a new house, you shall make a parapet for your roof, so that you do not bring blood guilt on your house if anyone fall from it.
Okay, so again, the point is that you need to make sure, again, applicable today, aside from the fact you don't want to get sued, that you need to make sure that your property is safe. I had a situation, I live over in the village, we have an HOA, and there was, in my sidewalk leading up to the front of the house, there was a clear out drain pipe that had come up from the concrete of about 2 inches. And I've been greatly concerned that somebody was going to trip over, maybe an Amazon delivery person. But, so I had to go to the HOA and I said, this needs to be taken care of. I won't talk about getting the fact it took me a year to get it done. But the fact of the matter is, I said, somebody's going to trip over this and get hurt. It must be fixed. And so again, this is, again, a wonderful law that we learned from the Torah, and that is our obligation to make sure that our property is safe, whether it's a parapet for a roof, but we have to think of others and we have to be concerned for their safety. Okay, let's go now to verse 10. And so we're flipping a page. This again, we're still in chapter 22, verse 10. We're gonna look at 10 and then we're gonna look at 11.
No, you read it.
Okay, so verse 10, you shall not plow with an ox and an ass together. Why is that?
Strengths and.
Exactly, different strengths. So what are we learning in this verse? We're learning here about cruelty to animals. Okay, very important. Again, there's a lot here. You think about how long ago the Torah was written and how much, again, we're talking about those mitzvot that are difficult for us to grasp today, but so many more that are in fact have laid the groundwork for a moral society. Now let's take a look at the next verse, okay? You shall not wear cloth combining wool and linen, okay? Anybody know what the Hebrew term for this is? Shatnez, very good, okay. To the best of my knowledge, you can still in the Orthodox community
Oh, yes.
get clothes made that have a label on them that says been tested for shatnez. Anybody know the reason why? What are the reasons for
But what they say here, I can sort of understand it, but I still think it's
Go ahead.
stupid. Well, here it says it keeps the laity, the priests were allowed to, laity was not. And it was so that the laity would not be confused with the priest.
Right. That's.
There must have been another reason.
Yeah, that's the only one I could come up with as well, but
Yeah,
yes.
because that's one of the things that people cannot figure out why we bother with that.
Yeah,
Those sort of towels have both.
I don't believe so.
I thought the tzitzit are wool, even if you have a silk towel, non-wool towels.
Yeah, I think this is more about the blending of the two into the creation of a garment.
Is this, by the way, for women too, or just for men?
Well,
Which one?
It's
women got their clothes because the men gave it.
What?
It's interesting because in early America and in England, linsey woolsey was a very common type of fabric that was used for clothing.
Yeah. Okay, let's skip now. Let's skip now to verses. It could also be, one interpretation of the shatnez also is that it's a chok. It's one of these laws that we get that really have no explanations to
I
them.
don't want to get off the subject, but how does this blending apply to such things as breeding hybrid dogs and seeds, plants?
I don't know.
Interesting.
Or GMO. And
Running into all kinds of hybrid dogs these days.
Good point.
how long are they hybrids before they become normal?
Yes.
I'm sorry, do you want to say something?
Yeah, well, there are many things that are mixed. Grafting plants,
Seeds.
roses,
Right,
and fruits like
Oh, sure.
apricots.
Intermarriage.
And pears
Blue odds.
done with
okay, let's go now to chapter 23, verses 8 to 9. This is now on page 1123. Actually, just verse 8, I think. Towards the bottom of the page, if somebody would read it.
You shall not abhor an Edomite, for he is your kinsman. You shall not abhor an Egyptian, for you were a stranger in his land.
I was thinking about the fact as I was reading this, and you fast forward many centuries later, that the relationship between Israel and Egypt has really been, pretty good, all things considered, since the peace agreement between Begin and Sadat. Of course, now we've got this whole situation with the Philadelphia corridor, and I don't know how that's going to get resolved, but, we think of, the Egyptians as, having been our enemies, and now, we have better relations, Israel has better relations with Egypt than much of the Arab world. Yeah.
I find that strange that you shall not abhor an Egyptian. You were a stranger, but you were enslaved there. But to me, it would seem the opposite.
Except that there's a commentary that points out that before the Israelites were slaves, it was a refuge for them to escape the famine. Remember, so it started out pretty good,
Yeah,
right?
I
Then it got bad,
Yeah, it went sour.
right? Which is the story of Jewish history, okay? How many places have Jews lived where it was good for a period of time,
Wow.
and you know, and then it got bad,
Yeah.
you know, so
Spain,
Germany,
What's
Money.
happening in
Yeah,
Germany? It's getting
absolutely.
better there somewhat.
America.
well,
But they have a
we're
lot.
hoping now we're concerned.
Rabbi, would it have anything to do with at the Seder? We are supposed to have feelings that the Egyptians.
Right,
they
the
were
spilling
Right.
of the drops of
Right.
wine, and the fact that we only say what we call Chatzi Hallel
Right,
during Pesach.
remember they were human beings that.
Exactly. Okay.
But then there's the little like the Ammonites.
So the בנים אשר ייוולדו להם דור שלישי, does it mean that that's the result of the marriage between a Jew and an Egyptian or an Adomi?
I'm sorry, say that again?
In the sentence 9,
Yeah,
בנים אשר ייוולדו להם דור שלישי יבוא להם מקהל אדוני. Does it mean that that's the children of the result of marriage between Adomi and Egyptian
yeah.
who is a Jew?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Seems to be what it would imply. Okay, let's look at our time. Let's look at chapter 23, verses 20 to 21. Okay. It's on bottom of page 1125. Okay, would somebody read for us?
You shall not deduct interest from loans to your countrymen, whether in money or food or anything else. It can be deducted from interest.
Keep going.
But you may deduct interest from loans to foreigners. Do not deduct interest from loans to your countrymen, so that the Lord your God may bless you in all your undertakings in the land and that you're about to enter and possess.
All right, so one interpretation, there are multiple issues here. One is, can a Jew lend money at interest to another Jew? Okay, so one interpretation that I found is that the Torah did not, and it's actually here in the Eitz Chaim Chumash, that the Torah did not conceive of commercial loans. Basically, it was thinking about helping out your fellow man, okay? Now, the second part of this, as we know, is problematic because of all the problems that it has created for Jews over the centuries. This perception of Jews, taking advantage of non-Jews, right? But we also know that there were times in history when having this kind of a vocation was one of the few vocations that in fact was open to Jews. But now that, they turn, we know that all sorts of anti-Semitism has evolved because of this point of view. So it's been very, very problematic. Okay, let's look at 2325. That's on page 1127. This is very interesting, and I don't it's a fascinating verse. I'll read it once again. 1127. This is chapter 23, verses 25 to 27. When you enter another man's vineyard, you may eat as many grapes as you want until you are full, but you must not put any in your vessel. When you enter another man's field of standing grain, you may pluck ears with your hand, but you must not put a sickle to your neighbor's grain. What do you make of this?
Your family, and you have your desserts there.
Take only what you need, not what you want.
Right.
No,
But,
don't.
you know, this idea that you can go into somebody else's field and just help yourself.
Right. Don't decimate it.
Right, but just the whole concept that somebody can do that, you
You're
know.
supposed to harvest somebody else's grain.
But you're entitled to go in and help yourself.
You
but you
can
can't-
have
Yeah,
something.
So assuming you are hungry enough to satisfy yourself,
Right,
but not to
right.
take advantage of it.
right.
So how would you interpret that into today when you're not a farmer? Is there? a way-
Well, so, I mean, yeah, I mean, could you extend that? You can go into somebody else's house, help yourself to a sandwich, but you can't make extra sandwiches to take out of the house. You know? That's why I said it's
How does it get in the house?
maybe the doors, he might break in, but maybe the door's open, yeah.
The problem, it says you may, okay? If everybody does that, then there won't be anything left in the field.
Right.
Okay, maybe, you know, it's a distance to the field, so it's only gonna be the people around there, or I think, you know, something else, but I'm thinking maybe as you're walking through from one place to the other, and his field happens to be in the way for something, it's not saying on purpose,
Mhm.
you go in there just to get it, because you don't have any grapes, and he does. But, you know, if you happen to be passing by, because everybody does that, then it's problematic.
All right, I see we're running, I'm sorry, go ahead.
To me, it just seems like that all laws are made to be applied to their proper time and proper
Yeah.
location or something.
All right, I know we're running short on time, but there's one other thing that we must get to. So let's go now to chapter 24, verse 16.
What number?
24:16, so it's on page 1131 near the top of the page. If somebody will read that verse.
Parents shall not be put to death for children, nor children to be put to death for parents. Persons be put to death only for a sin.
Okay, now keep your finger there, and now we're gonna turn back. We're gonna go all the way back in Exodus, chapter 34, verses 6 to 7. Let me get a page number for you. Thirty-four, 6 to 7. If somebody finds it before me, let me know. 34. Making it 24. 34, 6 to 7.
541.
541.
If I understood your number.
Again, is the case with, where is it? Was it Michigan or where the father is being put in prison because of the son?
Okay.
But it's for his own crimes, what he did.
Yeah, I understand that, but ordinarily that wouldn't be a crime. Only because the son did something wrong, he enabled.
All right, so, all right,
Okay.
this is page 541, okay? If somebody will read, we're gonna read we're gonna read the English and then we're gonna read the Hebrew, because the Hebrew should be familiar to you. Okay,
Holiday liturgy.
yes, okay. You wanna read? Go ahead. Somebody read verses. Go ahead.
The Lord passed before him and proclaimed, the Lord, a God compassionate and gracious, slow to anger, abounding in kindness and faithfulness, extending kindness to the 1,000th generation, forgiving iniquity, transgression, and sin, that did not remit all punishment, but visits the iniquity of parents upon children and children's children upon the 3rd and 4th generation.
So we seem to have a contradiction here, correct?
One's what God's allowed to do, one's what man's allowed to do.
That's one interpretation, okay? That is one interpretation. All right. Now interestingly, let's take a look at the Hebrew. This text is familiar to many of you, right? Because it's in the high holiday liturgy, it's in the festival liturgy. But look what happens. If you take a look at the prayer book, so I'll just refresh your memory. So I'm starting in the middle of verse 6. Hashem el rachum v'chanun erech apayim v'roch chesed v'yamet. Notzer chesed alafim nosei avon v'fesha v'chata'ah. That's where it stops in the liturgy, okay? It doesn't include the rest of the verse there. It doesn't, would you take a look at the High Holiday Prayer Book, in the festivals, Shlosh Regalim, it's in the liturgy there too. But it takes out the punishment to the third and fourth generation. Okay,
Our liturgy does that all over the place.
Of
It just
course.
Picks and chooses things and takes them out of context.
but here it's really,
Right.
really striking. Okay, so what are we to make of this? Okay? What are we to make of this contradiction? According to the Torah, children punished for the sins of their parents. So this brings us back to what I said at the beginning of our session, and that is that we live by rabbinic, not biblical law. Relative to these particular verses in the Talmud, this is interesting. Rabbi Yossi ben Chanina says, our master Moses pronounced 4 adverse sentences on Israel, but 4 prophets came forward and revoked them. Moses said, the Lord punishes the children and their children for the sin of their parents to the 3rd and 4th generation. Ezekiel came and declared, the one who sins is the one who will die. And then there's another passage in the Talmud that says, this reference specifically applies only to children who follow in their parents' footsteps, committing the same sins. So again, the rabbis, took what were difficult verses and reinterpreted them, because again, as the theme of our session this morning is that we don't live by biblical law, we live by rabbinic law. And historically, when the rabbis have found problems, they have looked to reinterpret them as best as they could to make them livable. Yeah.
It says the iniquity. What is the Hebrew, and is there a definition for exactly what they mean? Because we're saying sin, but is there a specific, what God's talking about? He says iniquity. To specify specifically what kind of thing, what is something that the parents will do that will affect the kids. If they bring the kids up in a poor way, yes, then the kids will suffer because the parents, or they didn't take care of them, or.
Well, and also that this concept of do as I say, not as I do, just doesn't work. That's part of it too, one interpretation is that it's to teach parents, that they have an obligation to raise their children in a proper manner. And that if they don't raise them and teach them how to be moral human beings, that is going to carry on to succeeding generations. That is one interpretation of this verse. Yeah.
There are several sects in Judaism that do not follow rabbinic. What do they do with all this?
That don't follow rabbinic.
Right.
Yeah, but they aren't. They aren't. I'm trying to think of the
Karaites.
The Karaites. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they're not really considered. They're not really considered Jewish.
They're not?
No. I don't think that anybody that doesn't follow rabbinic laws today is not really considered.
But do they do it?
And there's a
Do
group.
they Karaites? I don't know. But again, Karaites are not really considered.
In Ethiopia.
Rabbinic tradition.
Uganda.
Well, those have been challenges for the rabbis.
Yeah.
Are they Jewish or are they not Jewish? When you bring them to Israel, do they have to be converted or not converted? There's been a difference of opinion about that. Okay.
One less to do.
All right. It's about 10 o'clock. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Hope you found the session insightful. See you, everybody.